What we've seen, it's if I look over longer term, and that's kind of how I analyze things in that 5, 10 year time frame. We've seen some really nice gains in land value, especially over the last 5. But even if we stretch that out to 10, they weren't quite as quick in the early part of that 10 year time span, and then the past 3 years have been just astronomical with what land values have done. Now, what we have seen is we saw things kind of slow down a little bit in the fourth quarter of last year. And then as we came into 2023, it was kind of, let's see how this is going to pan out. And we've seen a further, what I call a de-escalation of values. And not reading too much into that, we're not talking about a drop in value. We're just not seeing increases as strong as we did, in 2021. And 2020 and 21 were just through the roof, and double-digit increases across many states. And now we're just down to where we're seeing maybe some single-digit increases. We've even seen some slight decreases when we talk about lower classes of land. Higher classes of land, still great demand for that, and they're still paying a premium.
Which is better for the industry? Double-digit increases or a little slower, 1 to 2 to 5%?
I'm a believer in slow and steady. And if we look out over that time period of go clear back into the 40s and see how land has appreciated over time, I really like that slow incremental growth. And so those sharp increases are a little bit spooky because they tend to breed sharp decreases. But the way the ag economy is today, we don't foresee that happening. It's in strong hands. It's not highly leveraged. The ag economy in general is pretty healthy, but that always is a little spooky to see something go up, because I'm a believer in the pendulum theory, where as hard as it swings one way, it could swing the other.
Well, let's go back to your beginnings, the 80s. You saw how quickly things can move and change. Are we in a state of the 80s again here right now?
And based on the way land is not highly leveraged and that balance sheets look good, we're certainly not there. Now, there are a lot of environmental and geopolitical events that could happen that could drive us to that point. But in today's market, no, we're like I said, the land is held in very strong hands, unlike the way it was in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. So yeah, we feel pretty good about and very bullish about agriculture in general.
Who is buying the land? Do you keep track of that?
Yeah, we keep close tabs on that, and it's an interesting dynamic. You read the stories about celebrity buyers and foreign buyers and things like that, but that's what hits the news. The real story lies in that the land is being purchased. The actual buyer of the land, over 70% of the time, is a operator farmer, local usually, and they're adding to their farm operation. Now, in saying that, there's a reason that these land values have moved up, and there's another class in the investor type buyers, funds, and just individual investors that are very interested in buying land. And so they are definitely holding a floor, and they're pushing some of those values up. But when they reach a certain point for their return on investment, they step away, no emotion, and then that's when the operator will make that final bid and usually ends up with the ground. And there's a lot of motivating factors. There's guys that have never seen a farm next to them come up for sale, and so they want to take advantage of that. And there's some pressures with making your operation a scale that will work in today's economy. And so that's the motivation on their side.
Is there an age of a producer? Because what I hear you saying sounds like an old producer, 70 plus ownership. Is that accurate?
As far as buyers go, we do see a lot of buyers in that definitely 50 to 70 range. There's definitely a lot of that. We do see a lot of young buyers that are using loan vehicles that are out there and options to purchase as if they're able. But I would say the majority are in that 50 to 70 range.
The Federal Reserve says they'd like to see inflation on a 2% clip. That's their goal. Is that a good land value increase goal that you would like, a 2% gain each year?
When I look out across that long-term chart, I feel good about a smaller gain than what we've seen the last few years. That's where I say, those sharp gains are a little bit spooky because you're worried of what's on the other side. If I'm speaking for other landowners, 2% might be a little bit low. They would probably rather see something closer to 5. If I look at it from a landowner perspective, I would say that I would rather be a little higher. But I also understand we have some struggles going on with the economy in general, and we've got to figure out how to get a handle on that.
The full discussion will be part of the MTOM release on Tuesday.